with your mind, let's go. It's right there, actually. You've been drinking tonight, trying your best, oh honey, just to make it right. No, it's the only thing that makes you feel alright. And I know you can come. I know that you can come home. I know that you can come home till you home. I know that you can come home. I know that you can. Of course you can. I know that you can come home till you know. They threw your body on the gears of the war machine, and it was a rumbling. You lost yourself all out on that road. You come on home and you're all full of holes. You try and patch it up, but it just don't hold. And I know you can come home. I know that you can come home. I know that you can come home till you know. I know that you can come home. I know that you can come home. I know that you can come home till you know. And I hold you tighter at night. I can feel your heart and it's slipping away. You tried to build a home and I sure hope you stay. As I look in your eyes, I can tell you're miles away. And I'll be working on this love until my dying day. And I know you can come home. I know that you can come home. I know that you can come home till you know. And I know that you can come home. I know that you can come home. I know that you can come home till you know. And I know that you can come home. I know that you can come home. I know that you can come home till you know where you belong. Where you belong. Sure, yeah. I left those bags up high above my head. Another home, oh, another day. Another day. My muscles ache and my body's getting sore, but I can't lay them down upon that cold floor. Oh, that floor. They'll get a flag and they'll shoot their guns off high, be laid to rest, and their mama, they will cry. Oh, they'll cry. You can't see their blood, but it's staining my hands, running deeper in my heart and in my veins. In the early morning of my daily welcome home, I wake up and I'm still holding on to their bones. Those brothers I carried, they left me buried in those brothers I carried, they left me buried in My blood is seething with those ghosts I laid to rest. I tried to drown them out, but they're coming for me at last. I left those bags up high above my head. Another home, oh, another day. And it's about some veterans I met almost 10 years ago now. Sort of vaguely about them. I left this valley and its stream running down in between mother and my broken father. Up on the hill where the coal was dug, life was lived and love was love. Great machine, fodder. And every burning light is light. Boys and girls that went to fight over land and water. And some will settle down too soon. They'll pace their dreams upon the moon, and they'll gaze in nightly wonder. Or if they'll go when they're 18, buy a car or joins the Marine, whatever gets them out faster. And every burning light is light. Boys and girls that went to fight over land and water. And every burning light is light. Boys and girls that went to fight over land and water. Fireworks on the 4th of July will light up that darkened sky and watch the chaos rolling. Burst of bombs in the neighborhood where we grew up just like we should, but it's not blood, just colors show. And every burning light is light. Boys and girls that went to fight over land and water. And they can rise up so high, they can sink down so low. And they'll be grinning, dancing, laughing like a clown, and crying on your shoulder. And every burning light is light. Boys and girls that went to fight over land and water. And every burning light is light. Boys and girls that went to fight over land and water. And in the backyard it's all smoke and ashes when you used to. Smoke and ashes when they used to. Smoke and ashes when you're used to.
Carmel Missionary Baptist Church, and we are delighted to have you here. I want to also say that as we are delighted to have you here, we're delighted to be a sponsor of being a part of this event, as well as our Mid-South Multi-Faith Veterans Initiative, as well as the DePaul Multi-Faith Veterans Initiative, which is directed by Dr. Walida Bennett, who is here with us on today. Thank you very much. May God continue to bless you and may He keep you. Thank you.
Good evening. Thank you to everyone who's come out this evening, and thank you to Pastor Jones for opening his beautiful church for this event. I'd also like to thank the Workers' Right Board Chicago Jobs with Justice for organizing the event. My name is Ann Lindgren, and I am the local president of American Federation of Government Employees Local 789. I represent social workers and mental health practitioners at the Jesse Brown VA here in Chicago. I am also a veteran of the United States Air Force, and I have dedicated my career to serving veterans at the VA. We are here to talk about an issue that is critical to the future care of veterans in this country: the growing efforts to privatize the VA. Right now in Washington, D.C., there is a debate raging about how our veterans should receive their health care. While there have always been attempts to privatize parts of veterans' care, there have been renewed efforts after employees at the Phoenix VA blew the whistle on management, fabricating patient wait lists and putting veterans at risk. Private industry and a Koch brothers-funded organization called the Concerned Veterans America saw their opportunity and began an all-out assault campaign to take down the VA and farm it out to the private sector. And it has been gaining support from both sides of the aisle in Washington. Tonight we will talk more about how we got to this point, what is being proposed, and what the implications are for the future of the VA and veterans' health care. We will hear from veterans who depend on the VA for their care and what they want for the future of their care. And finally, we will hear from workers who have dedicated their careers to taking care of veterans, many of whom are veterans themselves. After our panel discussion, we will open the floor to take questions and hear testimony from you all, if you have an experience from the VA that you would like to share. To begin with, I am pleased to introduce Suzanne Gordon. Suzanne Gordon is a journalist, patient advocate, and author of 20 books. She has spent 3 decades reporting on health care programs, workers, and policy. Over the last 5 years, Gordon has interviewed hundreds of veterans and their caregivers, lawmakers, and healthcare professionals about the Department of Veterans Affairs. Her first book on the subject, The Battle for Veterans Healthcare, Dispatches from the Front Lines of Policymaking and Patient Care, revealed how the Koch brothers and conservative lawmakers used the VA waitlist crisis to advance VA privatization. Wounds of War, her second VA book to be released in fall of 2018, captures what could be lost if the VA, an innovative and one-of-a-kind healthcare system that should be the model for American healthcare, is dismantled. Gordon's work has appeared in the New York Times, the Boston Globe, the Washington Post, The Nation, Atlantic Monthly, Washington Monthly, and many other publications. She has also appeared on C-SPAN's Washington's Journal, CBS Radio, and NPR's Marketplace. Please join me in welcoming Suzanne Gordon.
Thank you so much for having me today. Before I begin, I'd like to know how many people in this room are veterans? And how many people are healthcare activists who aren't veterans? Great. Do we have any congressional or Senate staff people in the room? Great, thank you so much for coming. So, I'm a journalist. I'm not a veteran. I've been writing about private sector health care for about 35 years. I edit a book series on healthcare for Cornell University Press. I've written 20 books myself, many of them on healthcare. And I've spent the past 4.5 to 5 years researching the veterans' healthcare system. I started writing about VA healthcare because I'd had some exposure to it, and I realized that there was an untold story about how about the high quality care that you can deliver if you are a healthcare system. I don't know how many people in this room know, but the Veterans Health Administration which is one of the 3 agencies in the VA, and it's very important to distinguish between these 3 agencies because I find that when veterans complain about the VA, almost nobody's complaining about the Cemetery Administration, right? Maybe because they're dead. But they're often complaining about the Veterans Benefit Administration, which is where you have to go to get access to the Veterans Health Administration. And a lot of people think that the roadblocks that they encounter at the Veterans Benefit Administration, the VBA, were somehow created by the VA, but we have who to thank for those roadblocks? Congress, right? Because Congress will not let every veteran get veterans benefits, right? We should, in my view, be providing health care not only to all Americans, like every other country on earth, but we should be providing, in my view, health care benefits to all veterans, all 22 million veterans, and I think we should be providing health care to their families. And if somebody tells you that they can't afford it, well, you have to say, well, how come you're thinking of privatizing the VA, which one estimate done for Congress showed would cost $450 billion if 60% of veterans went out to the private sector? $450 billion, right? If 60% of veterans saw private sector providers, right? And that was one estimate. And to put that in perspective, the VHA budget now is something like $70 billion. So that's over 4 times as much money. Let me give you another little factoid. It costs $150,000 to get a stem cell transplant in Seattle, where they send veterans to get stem cell transplants. They pay for their airfare, they pay for their family to stay, they pay for their hotel, etc. It costs $1 million to get that same transplant in the private sector. So the veterans healthcare system, I have discovered, is extraordinary because it's not only the largest healthcare system in the United States, it is the only publicly funded healthcare system in the United States, but it's also the only integrated healthcare system in the United States. And what do I mean by integration? It's so important for us who aren't veterans to understand what you veterans get, because I can't get the kind of care you get. If anybody's gonna integrate the care that the nutritionist gives me, or the psychologist gives me, or the oncologist gives me, or the neurologist gives me, or the primary care doc gives me, it's gonna be me, right? I gotta talk to each of them, and they will never talk to each other about me, right? And I'm easy compared to you. I'm 72. The average 65-year-old has 3 to 5 presenting problems. The average Vietnam vet has 9 to 12, right? I have a friend who's an Iraq War veteran. He has 16 different doctors, right? He said to me, if I had to go schlepping is Yiddish for driving. If I had to go schlepping around San Francisco to all these different doctors, the ones I can see in my one-stop shop at the VA, he said I couldn't work. You know, I'd be in a ditch, right? And that's the kind of thing people come back with from, and they don't even have to go into combat to have these problems, right? You don't have to be a combat vet to have more pain in your neck and your shoulders and your back and your feet and your knees from carrying 70 to 100 pound packs around. You don't have to go, and you don't have to leave the continental United States. You don't have to leave the continental United States to suffer military sexual trauma or PTSD, right? You don't have to leave the continental United States to get hit by a bus and lose your leg like my friend Susie Black in San Diego and have it amputated and need care and get it at the VA. She never was in combat. So the VA is integrated in that Patrick or Alejandro can go, it's Alejandro, right? Can go to their primary care doc and say, you know, I'm not feeling right in the head, I'm a little depressed, I'm whatever. And they're not going to put in a referral to a mental health practitioner somewhere across town that Patrick and Alejandro will probably never go to, right? They're going to walk them down the hall to the psychologist or nurse practitioner, psychiatric nurse practitioner, and introduce, the doctor is going to walk down the hall and introduce that veteran to that psychologist or mental health practitioner, and they can get treatment right then. If a veteran has questions about how to take their insulin or how to take their medication, they'll get walked down to the hall to a pharmacist. If they need help with their diet, they get walked down the hall to a nutritionist. My friend, my dear, dear friend, who was in the private sector, her doctor wanted her to see a nutritionist because she was morbidly obese. My friend, the primary care doctor, didn't know any nutritionists, right? And she had to look on a list to see what insurance would cover what. And of course, the woman, my friend, wouldn't go to that nutritionist, right? And 2 years later, ended up dropping dead in her kitchen, unloading a grocery bag full of junk food, right? Now, if she'd been a VA patient, maybe she would have died too, because we can't stick a gun to people's head and make them do the right thing. But she would have had a chance. And so veterans health care is integrated in that manner. I mean, I could go on and on. I'd be glad to answer questions, and I know the veterans in this room can speak to that. But what is being proposed in Congress? We have a system that's like a tapestry, right, of rehab facilities, blind rehab, spinal cord injury, polytrauma, residential treatment for substance abuse and PTSD, homeless prevention residential treatment centers in San Diego. I've visited places, you know, bicycle shops for homeless veterans in New Haven, efforts to beef up women's health care and have women's health clinics and facilities. And yes, the VA has taken perhaps too long, but it is trying in ways that the private sector can't possibly do. A private sector hospital, which has 1,000 or 2,000 veterans, right, that it sees episodically, women veterans, has no incentive to create separate women's health care facilities for those in veterans, because there's not enough of them. The VA has an incentive. Private sector doctors, the RAND Corporation just came out with a study today almost, or maybe it was yesterday, that assessed private sector physicians, mental health providers, occupational therapists, physical therapists in New York State to see if these people were ready and qualified to take care of veterans. They had 7 criteria that they judged these private sector providers on about their readiness to take care of veterans. Guess how many percent were ready to take care of veterans out of all these people? Guess how many percent?
70.
What?
20.
3.
2. 2%.
In New York State.
In New York State. Now, if we want to privatize VA healthcare or even send a significant portion of veterans out to the private sector, which is what's happening now in Congress, as we speak, they are privatizing the VA. If we want to do that, then every single state should be conducting a study like that study that the RAND Corporation did in New York State to see if these people are ready to take care of you, because you have very specific problems, right? Your average primary care doctor, I mean, this was another thing they found. This was extraordinary. Only 25% of physicians asked people if they had ever served in the military. I'm 72, I've gone to lots and lots of doctors. Nobody's ever asked me if I've served in the military. Why not? I could have served in the military. I could have been a nurse in Vietnam. I could have been I could have been anything, right? Nobody's ever asked that question, right? So they don't even know. They don't even have a baseline, right? They don't even know to ask that question. So right now, but in spite of the fact that those studies are not conducted state by state, Because you don't send folks out to the private sector and then discover, oh my God, you know, they don't know what they're doing, right? They don't know how to recognize Agent Orange-related diabetes from diabetes. They don't know that if somebody says, you know, they're depressed and they're having nightmares and they worry about being in crowds, that might be PTSD and that guy's a Vietnam veteran, because they don't even know he's a Vietnam veteran, right? I mean, literally, I've heard stories from people going to private sector doctors who have PTSD. I could have diagnosed it, right? And they didn't. I mean, it's extraordinary, you know, and it's not that hard to figure out flashbacks, nightmares. I mean, you know, Vietnam, PTSD, gee. And you don't just need meds, you need, so right now what we're seeing is we have study after study that shows that the VA provides care that is equal or superior to the private sector. Those studies are consistently being ignored by congressional representatives, right? And we have study after study that shows that private sector providers, RAND has done a bunch of them, and HRSA, Health and Human Services, has done a bunch of them. We have study after study that shows that the private sector does not have the capacity to handle the nation's veterans, right? And yet in Congress, what we're seeing is a debate not about privatization, but the pace of privatization. The Roe bill, which is what number? I can't remember. HR, well, they'll tell you.
4242. HR
4242 is a bill that is about outsourcing more and more care to the private sector. Isaacson and Tester's bill in the Senate, which was passed by Democrats and Republicans on the Senate Veterans Affairs Committee, which is again about outsourcing more care to the private sector. These are bills about dismantling the VA. More and more money is going to private sector providers and less to the VA. 49% in the hearing, in the House hearing on February 15th, it was Walz, Senator Tim Walz, who said to Secretary David Shulkin, between 2014 and 2017, you've increased the money going to the private sector by 49% and the money going to the VA for care by 9%. That is privatization. Privatization, and this is really important for folks to understand. Secretary Shulkin, Tim Walz, Phil Rowe, the head of the House Veterans Affairs Committee, Johnny Isaacson from Georgia, the House of the Senate Veterans Affairs. Everybody says we're against privatization. They can only say that if they define privatization as tomorrow they're closing Jesse Brown, they're firing all the veterans who work in that facility, and they're closing all the other facilities. They're selling off the desks and the chairs and the IVs and the beds and everything, and that's privatization. Nobody in America is insane enough to propose that, even though the Koch brothers would like that to happen. That's what they want. They want the VA to be a payer of care, not a provider. What is happening now is they're starving the VA of resources. Trump is for taking $2 billion of the $4 billion needed for infrastructure repair for the VA and giving it to choice to private sector providers. They want to freeze federal pay. They haven't filled over 35,000 vacancies, which would solve the problem. If the money, if the 15 or $16 billion that had gone to choice over the past 3 years had gone to the VA, you wouldn't have access problems. And by the way, the wait times in the VA are lower than in the private sector. So my plea to all of you is to call your congressional representatives. I spent the other day calling my congressman and 2 senators, and I am not lying, I timed it. It took me 3 minutes, and that included looking up their phone numbers, right? And I asked them if they'd heard from people about this issue, and the congressperson hadn't, right? They don't ask you what you think. They don't ask you for a dissertation. They're taking down the ticks. 3 minutes. Please raise your hands if you have 3 minutes to save, improve, and make stronger the VA. Okay, 3 minutes. Do it tomorrow, right? 3 minutes. I would also ask all of you to write this website down. www.ffvhc.org, Fighting for Veterans Healthcare. It's an organization of VA caregivers and veterans that's working all over the country to save the VA, to strengthen the VA, to improve the VA, because the VA has problems and it needs to be improved, absolutely. But do you improve a house? If you have a house and it's got a couple of rooms that need to be fixed, even if it's got half the rooms that need to be fixed and they're fixable, do you improve it by blowing it up?
Oh, no.
Right? And sending people to the private sector where the problems are even worse? Or do you fix those problems? And I don't see any action in Congress, I'm sorry, to fix the VA, to have the VA have market rate salaries so it can compete, to give the VA money to tell veterans that their care is good and and here's what they can do. In that study that Rand did, this is the scariest thing. Only about 10% of the providers understood the care the VA gives and knew how to refer patients to. So that means that if you have a private sector provider and you go in and you have never gone to the VA and you have problems that would be screened for in the VA, you're going to be denied care and compensation, right? Because this is a very serious problem, right? The other thing is we have these stickers. Now, you may not love the VA, but hopefully you want to save it to make it better. So take your pick. I'm not a veteran, and I have 2 of these on my car and 1 on my laptop, right? And I hope everyone in this room, how many people are going to put 1 of these on their car or on their laptop? Please, right? Take your pick. You know, you may not love it. Some of you do love it. I hear over and over again, the VA saved my life, the VA saved my life. I'd be in a ditch without the VA. Now, there are problems, and yes, they have to be fixed. But you know what? There are problems in any healthcare system. So I am not a veteran, and I have these on my car. And please raise your hands if you're not a veteran. Okay. I want you all, please, to call your congressional representatives because we cannot conceptualize this as a veterans-only issue. The Koch brothers want to destroy the VA because they don't want any of us in this room who aren't veterans to enjoy the benefits of a rational national health system or any form of government. They hate the VA because it works. They wouldn't be attacking it if it didn't work, right? They want to defeat national health care. Anybody in this room who's for Medicare for All should be on those phones and putting these on their cars and computers because the whole point of Stephen Cohn, hedge fund manager, who just pledged millions to defeat, to support Republicans, the Koch brothers, they hate government. They hate the people in this room who need help. Really. They hate the old, the sick, and the poor, and the people who aren't bazillionaires like them. They hate me, right? They don't care about you if you're a veteran. What they care about, well, I have these on my car. I have these on my car because I feel like it is my VA. This is not just your VA, veterans. It's our VA. Americans have devoted 70 years into funding a great healthcare system that does great research, teaching, and clinical care development. I have paid for the VA. I have benefited from its research. Thank you, the VA, for my shingles shot, right? And so it is up to all of us to save our VA and to support our VA. Thank you so much for having me.
Okay, so next we're going to be hearing from our panel. Our first speaker is Natasha Erskine. Natasha enlisted in the U.S. Air Force right out of high school in 1996. She gained a myriad of expertise across 4 operational commands, 11 assignments and deployments, and an enlisted internship at the Defense Logistic Agency. As a Master Sergeant, she executed a wide latitude of strategic level responsibilities, culminating her 20-year career as the V-22 Osprey Weapons Systems Manager for the Air Force Special Operations Command. Natasha is a service-connected disabled veteran and receives care at Lovell Federal Health Care Center. Please join me in welcoming Natasha.
Air Force veterans are representing today.
The few, the proud.
I know, yeah. So it's good to be here. It's good to see you all. Again, my name is Natasha Erskine. And I just really think that it's important, to have this space, like, just to build upon, like, where we're going and talking about why it's important to save the VA. Sometimes I get really passionate about this, or sometimes you might hear the passion in my voice. It is not because I am nervous or anything like that. I just get passionate and just builds in me, okay? So I just want to make sure I know that up top. And so when I think about the VA keeping its promise, like, what I run through is kind of like, like all the things that I've done, right? And all the calls that I answered, all those deployment orders that I took that took me away from my young daughter, disrupting her education, right? And not really realizing, like, all of the things that you put yourself through, whether that be mentally, and I didn't appreciate it because I just didn't know, right? So I think about the times when, when I had participated in certain deployments, right? So there's the deployment where we went from Iraq to Afghanistan, and we were trying to move some of the equipment from Iraq to the new theater. Well, what we did was we overdid it, right? So we sent too many of these particular vehicles. They're the mine-resistant, ambush-protected vehicles. We sent too many of them to Afghanistan, many of them which couldn't be used because the terrain is different, right? There's desert, and then there's the mountains, right? So someone should have thought about that. And so, because there was a surplus or a parking lot that we created, those vehicles had to go somewhere. And so, not really understanding it, because I was still, I was in my 16th year, grinding, doing everything that it took to be promoted and recognized, right? And then when I started realizing that in 2015, those vehicles had showed up on the streets of Ferguson. And so you don't think about that when you're in the, in the grind of it, right? Because you're doing the mission. And then when you see how it can devastate your people, and then it's a different, perspective. And I can tell you that when I took those, I would say that's when I had a moral break. So in my 17th year, everything changed for me. I became socially conscious in a real way. I started paying attention to things that pride and patriotism kept me from paying attention to, right? So the more that we got in those huddles and we did the hua, right, it made me ignore the things that mattered to me and my people in a real way. So when I talk about when I started having anxiety about this thing, and I would talk to my mental health provider, first they were ashamed, because I just didn't do it. I'm a strong Black woman. I am the daughter of, thank you, I appreciate that. I'm the daughter of Jamaican immigrants who are proud and have, raised me to just be a strong-willed person. So I didn't really appreciate the fact that I might have needed help. So a lot of that guilt that comes from not being there when your daughter's in her first play, a lot of that guilt that comes from just being away, a lot of the guilt that comes from I'm the reason why my marriage may have failed. Right, so all of those things, when I tell you I talked to that mental health provider who couldn't understand or appreciate some of the things that I was going through because I'm just a person, not just a master sergeant. And so those things became to really bother me because I really didn't have an escape. I found myself socially isolating myself because what I realized is that it was just so much noise, right? The mission had become a lot. The things that I was kind of, dealing with as far as being like a real person and dealing with those issues, I couldn't really get the mental health care that I thought that I deserved while on active duty. So I talk about that because I remember the promise was when you retire, the VA is going to take care of you. That's the promise. So when we talk about, I think it's right here on the banner, keeping the promise, that's a real thing, because I remember in my 18th year thinking, dang, 2 more years to get some help. So this is a real thing. This isn't just a banner. This isn't just a phrase, because that was really me and my experience. So when we talk about the veterans who are on active duty, some of them are my friends who are still currently grinding it out, excuse me, who are not talking about their ailments, who are not talking about their mental health, right? They're trying to grind because a deployment means a promotion. It means recognition. It means putting food on your table. So when I think about that and I think about the promise that they're expecting, I can tell you that most of them have deployed. She's giving me the 1 minute, and I had so much more to say. But when they're giving me like like I'm grinding, so that means that they're not also taking care of themselves. And I can tell you that they deployed I deployed twice. These guys have deployed 10 times. The VA is going to receive veterans that are more heartbroken than me, and I am telling you that I am standing here with 11 pre-existing conditions that I did not join the Air Force with, right? So I just wanted to share with you all in a real way, like what keeping the promise and what we're fighting for, right? Because there are people who may not have received the care that they should have gotten on active duty, and they are waiting to receive the care that I now say that the VA did keep its promise. I love the VA. I am receiving excellent care. There are conditions that were not addressed until I became a VA patient. So I wanted to thank you all. Remember why this is important. Make those phone calls, make some noise, and let's save the VA, y'all.
Thank you, Natasha. Our second panel member is Mark Dykes. Mark is a veteran of the Navy Hospital Corps, in which he served for 12 years. He is a service-connected disabled veteran, a patient of Jesse Brown VA, and also an employee of Jesse Brown, working in the lab as a medical technician since 2011. He also serves as a SEIU union steward. Please join me in welcoming Mark.
Hello, thank you for the introduction. Thank you for Susan and Natasha for their words before me. If I went first, I'd be even more nervous than I am right now. I guess I should just get right on to it.
Use the mic.
I'm a hospital corpsman, of course, and I'm the little guy. We's the guys doing all the work. The officers were the ones sitting in the back eating the hot dogs. So, discrimination, I know all about that. My father's a World War II veteran. He served in the Navy, and he never spoke about the war. He never said a word. In fact, I didn't even know he was in the Navy until my mom told me. And, got Negro on his DD-214, and, that whole little thing. Coming up after him, I just wanted to follow in his footsteps. That was my main goal for joining the Navy. I was out in Great Lakes, North Chicago, VA. I was active duty out there. I get seen out there as a veteran. I work at the Lakeside CBOC. That's part of the Jesse Brown VA. So I've been around. I've trained a lot of people that got promoted over me. And I've worked with admirals and captains and master sergeants and master chiefs, and I've seen it all. I've done shots, I've drawn blood, I've done IVs, I've done stitches. I've done a lot of work. After I got out in 2012, March 2012, I did 12 years, and I went to work for Aetna Insurance. I was a case manager assistant, and I was kind of young and dumb back then, but now that I reflect, I can really talk about some of this privatization stuff. One of the accounts that I was working was a gold card account. They told us not to tell anybody, but I don't work there anymore, so I guess I did. But the gold card account, basically what I did was, if there was a person that got admitted into the hospital and they had Aetna insurance, if they stayed less than 3 days, the gold card account, we paid that account. No questions asked. You don't care what you did, you don't care what medicines you got, whether you needed it or not, what interferences that they did with your body. We're just going to pay the bill because you got you in there for 3 days and we'll get you out of there. That's cool. If anything after 3 days, we requested a clinical review. And so we got a count the money and assess, what are you guys doing, what's charging all this money. And that was pretty much my job at Aetna. It was mostly cost-driven, and as far as doing the right thing for the patient, discharging this patient because he's healthy, or discharging this patient, because it was all about the money. So that was my experience working for the private sector. And then coming over to the VA side, I just feel that healthcare is a right, not a privilege. There are so many veterans that are just, to cut the chase. I met a young lady out on the street, north side of Chicago, and she was just really distraught. And I was like, "What's going on? What's wrong?" And she was like, "I got four children, single mom, and I don't have any insurance. I really don't know what to do." And long story short, she told me she was in the Army. And I was like, "Are you crazy? Are you serious?" I'm like, "You gotta go down to the VA, go in to check in there." And she went down there and she did her means test and all of that good stuff, and she got seen, regardless of the ability to pay. You will get seen by the VA regardless of your ability to pay. And so I seen her again about 2 weeks later, and she was just happy and just full of glee. She got a social worker, and she was just very, very just like a weight lifted off of her. And it made me feel proud just for sharing the information. And so I'm not what you call it, the veteran representative, but whenever veterans ask me questions, or any civilians ask me any questions, I pass on whatever I know, because you never know. That might be the difference between that person jumping off of a building. That person might take that gun and use it on themselves, and you just don't know. There's just blessings all over, and you just have to just know we are calling. And the VA is a model to the rest of the country that we're all in this together. We can put this system in place where regardless of your ability to pay, you can get seen. We'll talk about the money later. But, when it comes down to your eating a meal versus going to buy your medication, my mama is 79. She pays like $400 a month just for her health care coverage, and she has another $300 something just for her medications. And I got my cue, so thank you for listening to my spiel.
Thank you, Mark. Our next panel member is Adelena Marshall. Adelena is the NNU director at Jesse Brown VA Medical Center. And NNU at Jesse Brown represents over 490 RNs who advocate for veterans' health care and at Jesse Brown and its outpatient clinics. Please join me in welcoming Adelena.
Thank you, our veterans, everybody here in our panel this evening. My name is Adelena Marshall. I am a registered nurse at Jesse Brown. I've worked with the VA since '91. I started out as a part-time, and then I went to intermittent, just working a day or two here and there. And then in '05, I retired from another outside job that I had, and went full-time with the VA. You'll find that the RNs advocate for our patients' health and care. We're an advocate for single-payer health care for all. And we find it very disturbing that the VA would try to close or cut down services to our vets. I ran across this article a couple days ago, a state-by-state breakdown of 83 rural hospitals. Most of them occurred in Texas, Tennessee, Georgia, Alabama, Mississippi, North Carolina. And we get many of our vets from those areas just because of going into the military affords them other opportunities. This is not just for rural areas, though. There's hospital closing everywhere because hospitals are now big business. Congress is aligned with big business, and this is one of the reasons why they would like to close the VA, because they see money. I reminded every day of, I think it was a video of this little boy, and he was talking to his mother, and he was saying, "Can you just listen? Just listen. Can you just listen?" And I think about that as we're advocating for our veterans. The VA seems to be, and the policies dictated by Congress. However, they're not listening to our veterans. They're not listening to our frontline employees. And I don't remember ever having a meeting in all the years that I've been at Jesse Brown with anybody from Washington asking us, what do we feel about the VA? They don't want to hear it. They don't want to know that we need safe staffing for our veterans. They don't want to know that we need adequate staffing or other personnel to deliver the services that our veterans need and entitled to and should have. They don't want to hear that. They don't want to hear stories of my peers who, one is in the back, just shared an incident with me about a patient who came from an outside hospital for dialysis, and he told her, I almost died. They didn't care about me. He said, I'm glad I came to the VA because you guys care and you've saved my life. We see that every day. We hear that every day. But when I have other nurses in the back too who've lost their position at the VA because they dare to question what was going on, to advocate very strongly for certain positions and certain things that were going on, especially our mental health inpatient unit. So the nurses are very committed at Jesse Brown and throughout the VA to our veterans and to be a voice for you, to advocate for single pay, to advocate for appropriate health care, to advocate for appropriate funding of the VA so that we can get the staff in there to support what the VA wants to do. They do have some pretty good programs. They every day is kind of changing, but it's almost like that little boy. Can you just listen? Just listen, just hear us, just hear what our veterans want, hear what the staff is trying to tell you, and stop blocking the information that we can provide you to help improve the VA so that we can keep it open for our veterans.
Thank you, Adelena. So we have our fourth panel member. His name is Alejandro Rodriguez, and he is a United States Air Force veteran and also a former employee of Jesse Brown VA. Alejandro worked in the Office of Community Care processing privatized care claims for the last 3.5 years. Please join me in welcoming Alejandro.
Yeah, thank you. I'm going to try to keep my composure. I'm pretty passionate about this and about what the VA brings to me. And I worked on the side that is moving business elsewhere fast and furious. All I can think of right now is my old supervisor. I just resigned from the VA Friday. I work with the state of Illinois now as a veterans employment coach on Woodlawn. I just started today as my first day with the state of Illinois as a veterans employment coach. And the VA needs to be saved, and the department that I worked in, the Office of Care, the department that is integral to the privatization of the VA, is actually slowly getting dismantled. As of today, the supervisor of the department is moving on to a bigger position within the privatization of the VA, and the 3 staff members that are left to process the 3,600 claims before winter. Winter is a heavier month for privatization. Heavier season. Those 3 processors that process about intake is 3,600 claims a month. This was before winter. Are now left without a supervisor and to try to figure things out. And they're being held on a quota to process these things that, yeah. So I'm gonna start with some notes. I got about 10 notes that I took down that I want to try to get out within my 5 minutes. So the first one is that ER coverage is being overlooked within this privatization, and it's a very, very, very critical part. Within the ER claims that I'm talking about, so veterans who have worked their way to retirement, who have gotten their health care through the VA, their adulthood since they separated, once they get Medicare, if they have an emergency and they go to their local ER, they get screwed. The VA does not help them. Unless it was something that was related to their service connection, then the VA will step in, but after they've possibly been through collections for it. So veterans who get sent out for health care through the VA deal with getting billed directly after 60 days from the provider who provided them the service. And when you have 3 people to process 3,600 claims, that's just coming in, not to include the backlog. Some people are going to get left out, unfortunately. They no longer have any walk-in customer service for this type of job. Now they have to call the VA, and they only have one representative to answer the multiple of calls that come in for anything related to privatization within the VA, within the local office, that is. So the 3, let me see here. So there are currently 3 avenues that the VA uses for privatization. One of them is a contract called patient-centered care. Well, there's a different dialysis contract, patient-centered care, choice claims, and then the internal office of community care, which I worked at. So the numbers that I'm given about the 3,600, that's not including the ones that go through choice or patient-centered care or through dialysis. That's just the internal office of community care. Those choice claims and the patient-centered care, they go through a company called HealthNet, who is historically corrupt and has taken government money and not used it properly, but they still got another contract. Don't ask me how. The understaffing. Already, as we're speaking, the work that was done by the Office of Community Care, the job that I used to do, a good portion of that is now going to contractors. So they're privatizing. So yeah, let's see here. So I personally was under a performance improvement plan for showing integrity with the VA. With those emergency claims that I was talking about, the ones that get really overlooked, we get the documentation that is necessary, but because we're understaffed, we didn't have the ability to complete the process correctly, and I wasn't just rejecting the claims, which is what they wanted me to do, to just push the numbers and make it look pretty. I was holding on to that, and before you know it, my job was on the line because I was showing integrity. So I'm passionate about the VA, as you can tell. I'm an Uber and Lyft driver part-time when I'm not working for the government. And anybody who comes into my car who wants to hear about what I do for a living, I tell them about the VA and how, if they know a veteran, how they should get health care within the VA. Because it saved me. I was going through depression before I started working. And I went to the VA I was sick. Before you know it, I was getting mental health, and I was getting people there who helped me see an ability to transition into civilian life, and the VA needs to be saved.
Thank you, Alejandro. Okay, now that we've heard from our speakers, we'd like to open up the floor for questions for our panelists. We'd also like to hear your stories as to why you believe the VA is worth saving. Considering we have limited time, I would kindly ask you to keep your stories or questions to a minute or two. And for those of you who are interested in asking questions, there's a microphone here.
We can bring it around.
Nobody's going line up, yeah.
Yep, line up, please.
Can everybody hear me? Good evening, my name is Patrick Cano, I'm a former Marine Corps veteran. Rah, 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 feeling proud. I'm also the president of HUD Local 911. We care for the VA. Oh, help me out. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Let's figure it out. I hate having all these people behind me. I'm a Marine. I have PTSD.
Turn around, turn around.
Yeah, thanks guys. Hi everybody. I don't like a lot of people standing behind me. All right, is that better?
Yeah.
Better? Good evening everybody, my name is Patrick Cano. I'm a former United States Marine. I am the president of HUD Local 911. We support the VA, obviously restaffing is a big issue. I actually am a choice patient. I have my choice card right here. Came to me so I can go see my local clinic. No, I can't. I have to call and get everything pre-approved. It says on here it has to be pre-approved. I've tried it. After a month, you give up. If you break your leg, you can't call in and get it pre-approved to go to the doctor. I can go here to Jesse Brown, which is actually an hour and a half from my house, come up here, get the treatment I care on my leg, and let's say they notice I have a bad tooth. They'll ship me over to a dentist and they take care of the tooth. So I have what's called continuity of care at the VA. And again, I have PTSD, which makes life fun, so they can identify those things and say, you're having a Marine moment, and let me correct myself. So my take on the privatization of our VA healthcare is not gonna work. I'm telling you, I've been doing this since 2015, and I still have yet to use that card and get meaningful treatment. Again, Jesse Brown VA saved my life. And it also, the VA, when I came home from the Marines, gave me medical, dental, job training, job placement, and even taught me how to write a resume. And today, I'm gainfully employed at HUD, thanks to the VA. I'm standing in front of you, thanks to the VA. And when I came home, I climbed into one of those holes, so my wife came and seen me, and it was actually my wife who said, you go to the VA. I went to the VA, and I'm still married. That's my story. Thank you.
Why don't we do the line right here, and then people can go take turns. So, yeah, thank you.
Hello. Hello, my name is Michelle, and I'm here from the Chicago Democratic Socialists of America Healthcare Working Group. The Chicago DSA works with local progressive community issues. Right now, we are working to organize the Medicare for All campaign. We view that healthcare is a right for all people. I come from a military family. I'm an Army brat, if you will. And I know how important the VA is. I saw firsthand how they support and give veterans and their families support. VA hospitals are one of our best examples of socialized medicine. We can see that a strong and fully funded VA hospital could be a model for Medicare for all. We need to let our lawmakers know how important the VA hospitals are to veterans' physical and mental health. The hospitals should not be privatized. Our veterans' health should not be left to the whims of an exploitative capitalist system. Veterans are valuable members of our society as a whole, and we should treat them that way. A functional and fully staffed VA would benefit the entire community through their various educational, career, and employment programs for veterans that help them transition to civilian life. Privatization of the VA would starve it of resources that veterans depend on to live healthy and stable lives. Veterans deserve the right to quality health care and mental health services. Veterans deserve the same health care that lawmakers and the wealthy enjoy. Veterans deserve the same rights that our politicians enjoy. Those who send our young people into multiple wars deny returning soldiers resources that are falsely viewed as a privilege rather than a right. The Chicago DSA joins the coalition to support the right to heal, and we will continue to organize and work with our allies toward keeping the VA funded. We will work for health care for all. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Monique Lewis, and I'm a registered nurse, and I was a colleague of Adelena, and I'm the one who got booted out of the VA because I dared to care for the veterans. And it was a rewarding experience in working with the veterans. I work in the private sector now, and I want to give kudos to you because you said so many things about the veterans in the private sector. I am an advanced care coordinator in the heart failure clinic at the organization I work with. I come across many veterans that I had to step in and advocate for them because no one knew how to deal with veterans. I had to get them going with the VA so they can get dental care, eye care that they couldn't get in the private sector. And so when we talk about privatization of the VA, I've done trauma, I've done ICU, I've done ER, I have done it all practically. And I've worked in practically every hospital in Chicago. And I'm gonna tell you, there's problems all over. There's a problem with staffing. There's a problem with the EDs. So to say that the veterans can go to the private sector and get better care, I'm telling you, no. It's no. And I would like to say this. I ain't gonna be up here too long because I can go on and on. It's the nurses in the front lines of the battlefield, down in the trenches, that are taking the hits directly and indirectly to provide good quality health care for our veterans and for people who are not veterans.
Yay, nurses.
And I want everybody in this room to raise their hand because I'm going to ask you to do something. Everybody got to raise their hand, okay? When you go to your doctor, when you call your doctor's office, when you go to the hospital, when someone is talking to you, you ask them, are they a registered nurse? And I'm going to tell you why. Because a lot of the hospitals in the private sector and in the clinics, they're staffing these clinics with high school graduates. And you're calling and you're asking them about your lab results and your medication, and these people do not have the training or the background.
Yes.
My name is Don Doty. I'm president of a nonprofit organization called the Georgia Doty Comprehensive Health. I was brought to Chicago many years ago, old school, by W. Clement Stone and Harold Washington. My mother and I at Georgia Doty set up the first welfare to work allied health training school in America. And they brought me to Chicago to duplicate the school that we had there. The school that I operated here in Chicago was called Center for Employment Training. And for 24 years is one of the leading trade schools in Chicago. I figured then I'd be able to reach into another target population once I figured out that I had other concerns and other health issues that I wanted to address through our mission statement. And hepatitis C became one of them. And after I got into hepatitis C and then got hepatitis C as a veteran, I realized that there's thousands and thousands of veterans that's over the age of, say, 55 to 60 that was born or went into Vietnam between between 61 and 72, or people who lived through that period, are very at risk for hepatitis C. I never knew what it was. Most of us didn't know what it was. But anybody who had blood transfusions or been in the hospital, and now I have an air gun that I give at my different demonstrations to show that the air gun was faulty and proved to be faulty, because every time they went down the line to air gun everybody's shoulder, I got your blood on my back. You know what I mean? If you had it, then it went down the line. And so it was a fact. Many veterans are getting benefits for it. Many veterans should research it and look into it. There's no symptoms. You never know you had it unless you got tested separately. Not a blood test, but a separate blood test for hepatitis C. April 6th, we're producing a male, female, unemployed, and homeless veteran forum at a church called Mount Calvary Missionary Baptist Church. It's located at 1259 West 111th Street on April 6th at 10 o'clock. We have 30 employers, different veteran organizations there to provide resources, and we're working with the Department of Corrections. So I want to reach some of the veterans that are incarcerated, that are now coming out of incarceration, to be educated, to reconnect back into the system. So I'd like to be able to hope that everybody could possibly remember April 6th, or if you can remember, if anybody got a pen, my website is, and if everybody get a chance, it's www.Georgia, like the state of Georgia, Doty, D-O-T-Y, Inc.org. And in that, you'll also see various people from Washington that's advocating for our program. We're now setting up our program in Atlanta, LA, and Vegas. So this National Health Disparity Program is all targeting the veteran population. So I hope you get a chance to take a look at it, and thanks for the opportunity.
How y'all doing? I guess I'm next, but I don't need a microphone. I would like to thank all the nurses that helped look after me, because I went in for a heart procedure last September. If it was not for the professionalism, the caring and staff who looked after me, I did a little bit too good a job, matter of fact. Every 45 minutes, I couldn't get no sleep, amen? Every 45 minutes, they came in there checking on me like clockwork. You cannot get that kind of help in the civilian sector. Now, I talk with other veterans while at Jesse Brown, because sometimes I also go to the food pantry. I have a friend of mine who's also a veteran in Albuquerque. They don't have that there. The kind of caring that we have at Jesse Brown, he doesn't have there. He tells me, Cliff, I wish I could come down to Chicago and be where you are. I could get the kind of help I need. You cannot let this go to the private sector. They want to let it go there because they see money that they can make. I'm already talking to veterans now where they got some people in the staff telling them after you turn 65, you got to go somewhere else. You got to get your own health care. You got to get your own insurance. This is how serious it is. It's not about providing better health care. This is about profiteering. Every pill you get, every little help you make, if you get any kind of assistance at all from the federal government for your disability, I got news for you, a little chunk of it's going to get taken. It's going to be a charge. The kind of love and caring that you're seeing now, it's not going to be there. Now, from what I've seen from Jesse Brown, the equipment is not there. Inadequate staffing. All the monies and stuff is there, but see, if you provide adequate staffing, if you give them adequate equipment, if you give them the kind of support they need, then you can't ask for money. You can't fix what's not broken. So they keep it at this state for a reason. And you're seeing what this reason is. Now, I talked to my buddy in Albuquerque. He's one of the few vets, Air Force like man over here.
All right now.
Okay? He's one of the few vets I talk to. And he knows, and we get political sometimes, and we don't always agree. We butt heads like, Republicans and Democrats. We don't always agree, but one thing we agree on, if they could take out the veterans first and privatize us and take our rights out first after we fought for this country, then Social Security is going to be next. It's going to be next, but they got to take out the veterans first. Now, you are no longer bound by the UCMJ. Everybody in here is U.S. American citizens. All I want to know, and I thank you for the food, the coffee, the munchies, and all that other stuff, the whole 9 yards. But all I want to know is what legal, comprehensive plan that we can take in order to stop this. What do we have to do? What forms do we have to fill out? Who do we have to write? What website do we have to go to? What march do we have to be a part of in order to stop this? Don't go quietly into the night, people. Look over your shoulder. You got other veterans and stuff that's coming home that's still behind you. You can't expect them to stay ahead on the war front, and we giving the war away and losing on the home front. They got nothing to come home to.
Talk about it.
All right.
Take your time. Take your time.
It's on us. All I want to know when I came here is what can we do to stop this? Not how we can passively let this go along. No, what can we do to stop this? This ain't Russia. This is the United States. We have a choice. What can we do for ourselves and other veterans that's coming back home? What can we do to stop this?
We have to make some noise.
Gotta get organized.
Made it easy for you.
Well, wait for the fire to go down a little bit. I wanted to share 2 things with you and then make a request. My name is Willie Mack, and I served in the military. I was with the 101st Airborne and the Long Range Patrol. And I want to tell you about an incident that happened to me, go back to the year 2007. Now, I'm not saying the men are like that here, but back in 2007, I was one of those guys who, if you feel a pain, you tough it out. You tough it out. That was what I was taught. And my wife said to me, let's go to the hospital. And I said, no, I don't want to go there. I want to go home and lie down and, take a nap. And she insisted that we go, and we went to Jesse Brown. And many of you know the ER. When you got in there, looked on the wall, and saw those, they had about 10 indicators of a heart attack. I said, my God, I got 5 of them right here. And the next thing I knew, I had to bend over. Couldn't stand up straight anymore. I had to bend over, and they, rushed in and brought the wheelchair and everything, and then they fixed me up. Talking about Jesse Brown Hospital. I want to give that name again. And, I have 3 stints now, but if I had waited about 35 minutes more, I would not be here to talk to you. So I just wanted to share that with you. The request that I want to make is based on my experience in the military. I was a radio operator, and I used to deal with sergeants and peons, so to speak. And that's one way of doing things. But things changed when they gave me an assignment to work with the generals. The generals see the big picture of everything. I was amazed. It was like being in a different world. Somebody said something about the officers or whatnot eating hot dogs or whatever. Well, they were eating better than that. But I want to take that example and share that and make the request of the group. Now, you have our names, you have our phone numbers, you have our email addresses and things like that. It is one thing to call these representatives and those speakers and say, okay, Congressman, do so-and-so, so-and-so. And you know what? They just make little tick marks. I know because I've seen how they operate. I'm making the request that the people who are here, that we stay in touch, because this is a war. It's a war. I mean, the speaker who preceded me set the place on fire here. I'm just trying, So please take that information that we have, keep us informed so that we can inform our contacts so we can stay on top of this. That's my request.
I'm going to ask for permission to speak a little bit longer if I can.
Yeah, we've got about 10 minutes. We've got one person behind you, it looks like. I'll be quick.
Okay. I'm going to pick up from where she left off. Actually, I'm going to pick up from where she should have started. Okay, instead of where she did start, where Susan started. All right. I'm with the American Legion, with 4th District, American Legion, Department of Illinois. All right, back during World War I, this is going back quite a ways. All right, guys in the trenches were talking about how everything was going with the war and everything else, and how a lot of the guys were being injured, and how the people previously to them from the other civil wars and everything else were injured, and when they got ready to get out of the service, what they got was they got their pay, they got a kick in the butt and sent on their way along with their discharge. All right. So from that time of these guys talking, they were sitting there talking in the trenches. They said, we need to do something about this. This is ridiculous. We got guys that are going home with legs, lost, arms lost, not going to be able to provide for their family, and all this. So what they did was they organized and they started talking in the trenches. And out of just these two guys talking in the trenches, they organized what the American Legion is today. And the American Legion is the only worldwide veterans organization here in our country. So, I mean, we've been fighting for years and years and years for these same battles, these same things that everybody here has been fighting for. We have always believed, and we will always believe, that every veteran should be entitled to 100% health care like it was first proposed. Okay, when it first came out, the guys from World War I, World War II, when they first came out, they had complete veterans, health care, along with dental, along with hearing. If you went blind, you got a CNI dog, so on and so forth. Okay, well, we don't have that anymore. And why don't we have it? It's because we failed to go out there and fight for it. We failed to organize and stay organized and continue to fight for it. Now, if you look around here, we're the ones that are to blame, all of us veterans, and all those people that know that it's wrong for the United States government to keep doing what they're doing to the veterans. They should always have health care.
There, and does it have anything to do with why certain people want to see you go away?
So one of the reasons why they'd like to privatize the VA is because of the pharmaceutical. They get discounted drug prices. Another reason why they want to privatize the VA is that the VA, because doctors and nurses and so forth are on staff, they have no incentive to overtreat. So they have no incentive to give you that 4th round, 5th round. We spend $1 out of $7 on futile, unnecessary, toxic treatment in this country, and the VA is a leader in end-of-life and palliative and hospice care. And they tried in California to get VA, there was an effort in California to get the same kind of pharmaceutical bundling and discounting and negotiation for people just in the public sector hospitals and systems. And tragically, and I hate to say it here, and I hate to say it, but it's true, the veteran community helped to defeat that law. It was tragic. It was like, we want ours and we don't care for the rest of you. And some major veteran service organizations, leaders of veteran service organizations, were behind the defeating of Prop 61 in California. Very sad to see veterans used in that way. Yes?
Why would they have cut into veterans' money?
What?
Why would they have cut into veterans?
It wouldn't have. Had no impact. But some VSO leaders were, I think, lobbyists for Big Pharma. And it was very sad. And, you know, one of the things about single payer that I think you have to be prepared to see is that veterans will be mobilized and given misinformation that the VA will be dismantled if we have a national health system, and nothing could be further from the truth.
Hi, my name is John Franzese, and I was in the Coast Guard. I don't know if anybody else is. It seems like nobody is. But may I make a suggestion? If we don't get in the streets, if we don't get in front of the TV cameras in numbers, then we're not going to win. There's just no way. This is a wonderful meeting, and it's great. There's energy here. But unless, in my opinion, we get in the streets like we did with a lot of other things, we didn't always win. But I think with this thing, with veterans in the street, it's a natural. You're going to win. But this is wonderful. This is a beginning. But it can't end here, and it can't end with internet and mailing to one another. We need to organize out in the street on State Street with 8,000 or 10,000 people, which should be easy to do. There's a lot of veterans, and we have to keep the message straight, that it isn't just the VA they want it all. Right. And we're just one pawn in the whole thing, and it's the system that's wrong, not just people after the VA. The Koch brothers aren't after the VA, they're after all of them. And I have to say that Mr. Trump is right there with him. I can't say that other word that goes with his name, but please, and then your organization is a wonderful one, and one of my cousins was one of your presidents, and we need to get the socialists with us, everyone, but please, think in terms of, I'll be happy to work with whoever's here, but we should get in the streets in numbers as quickly as possible, as often as possible. Woo! And let the police do what they want. Half of them are vets anyway. And that's the real problem. They won't be able to use it. Thank you.
We have time for just a couple more questions because we do have one final speaker tonight who is going to kind of outline a plan for action. So I want to be sure that we have time for him to speak.
Hi, my name is Bridget. I'm a veteran. I use the Jesse Brown VA. I have a couple of questions and just 2 comments. I had used Veterans Choice last year, one time, at Ingalls Hospital in Harvey. They never sent my medical records to the VA after a whole year. But they called me for 6 months, threatening to send me to a collection agency, despite the fact that the VA patient advocate kept calling them. They ignored it. When I talked to the Ingalls patient advocate, they didn't do anything for me. They sided with the hospital. And they were very rude, saying if you're employed, then you need to start paying on this. The way that I stopped that was by calling a local newspaper that wanted to do a story on veterans, Northwest Indiana Times. When they called them, they called the next day and said that the bill was deleted. So, I used Veteran Choice again. Although the practitioner for that is good, it took 15 months for HealthNet to schedule the appointment. And then the practitioner has not been paid since last September. So being that, my questions stem from the fact that I see 6 or 8 specialists at the VA plus pain management. And with all of that, I could schedule like 3 appointments in one day. If it was privatized, you have to go to all different places. You'll have to travel to all those places on all different days. And what would happen to all of the programs we use in the VA? Like, I use things like, I just took a health class, yoga, stuff in the wellness center like Tai Chi, and the OEF floor. What would happen to that? I'm guessing it would be gone. So what would we do without all of those things, and then how would we manage that if it's privatized? This was my biggest fear with the Trump election, and I tried to inform people, but nobody seems to listen until I found this meeting. And following the Concerned Veterans of America, which is not a veterans organization, they're from the Koch brothers. So anyway, I don't know if anyone is here that can answer my questions about what we do about that. I don't know how soon the VA is going to be privatized, because the politicians and this administration is not listening to the veterans at all.
I mean, it's an organizing and mobilizing job, and we have to hear your stories, you know? And I mean, you know, you gotta take 1,000 people, 100 people to the senator's office, to the congressman's office. I mean, don't just call, yes, but bring. My husband's a union organizer, and, you know, many years ago, Ted Kennedy, when he was alive, excuse me, I need some water, but he wouldn't meet with the union people. And then my husband brought 500 people to his office, and guess who met with the union people? You know, so I'm all for, you know, doing all this stuff. And the reason why these guys in the private sector aren't getting paid is because they're not sending the documentation back to the VA. Right? Because they're not used to that. That's not what they do. That's coordinating care. And in one of the hearings in Washington, when one of the people from the VA, Bali, who isn't there anymore, was asked by Senator Manchin, are you going to require them to give documentation in order to be in this new choice program? Are you going to require them to go through the trainings that VA staff go through? Suicide prevention training, disruptive behavior training. Hey, you know some veterans who are really pissed off and angry, right? And they sometimes are not so polite. The VA can't fire you as a patient. The private sector can. If you get a preventable medical error in the VA, if somebody screws up in the VA, you are covered forever, as it's considered a service-connected disability. If you get care in the private sector, and this is going to happen if you're choiced out, what's your option? Sue. That's it. And you know what lawyer? Only 2.6% of genuine medical malpractice claims ever get lawsuits. So you have to really, like, you know, tell it like it is, and take this message, like you said and other people said, right to them. And the question is, why are you doing it? Why aren't you listening? Why are you doing this when you know all the facts and all the studies? And it's our bodies. And the other target, and I really hope people will do this, is the media. Because the media refuses to do good stories about the VA. We need veterans to go to the Chicago Tribune, and I don't know what all the stations are. We need veterans, 100 veterans, to show up and say, how come you haven't done one good story about the Veterans Health Administration? And we have like 9,000 studies, research studies in 1 year to show all the good care. Why aren't you doing these stories? You can force them. You know, I'm a woman, as you can see. And in 1970, right, they never asked a single woman in any of the nation's newspapers for any opinion about anything, and we fought. And the same is true for African Americans, and the same is true for nurses. They don't interview nurses, they interview doctors. And we fought. And now they have nurses as sources, and African Americans, and women. And why you can do the same thing for veterans' health. Why is there not a single good story in the New York Times or the Washington Post or the Chicago Tribune about all the great stuff the VA does?
It's in Chicago. It's an independent newspaper.
But
Do you have something?
Yeah, I got some insight about the choice situation. That was it, Bridget? I just think. Yeah. So, you know, I worked in the private. I worked in the Office of Community Care where we dealt with the claims. One of the issues that happens with choice claims specifically. Now, remember that is a contract that's ran by a company called HealthNet. It's it's a huge contract. All right. So the way that choice claims work is the doctor decides whether they're gonna do an internal authorization through the Office of Community Care where the bucks are still for privatization, but they're still being coordinated through the VA. Where they'll have a VA coordinator, or they send it through choice. And choice, the same VA coordinator that would do the internal, all they do is communicate with the veteran, let them know, hey, look, the doctor wants to send you out, but they're going to do it through choice. We're going to send this document to HealthNet, and they are going to do all the rest. All we're going to do is just keep record of it. If you have any issues, you're going to go through choice directly. Well, choice is understaffing. They're understaffed. They're not processing the claims. Sometimes they're not even communicating with the veteran. You know, through phone. All they'll do is just they'll blindly coordinate this stuff, and the veteran will know at last minute through a letter, hey, your appointment is at such and such place at such and such time. Well, the provider isn't even really reading the contracts because they're similar to the VA's internal authorizations. So the patient goes out to get the care. The company sends the claim to my office. My office is understaffed. We're not able to see that claim till maybe a month or two later, and then we reject it and say, you sent it to the wrong place, send it a choice. Well, now the company's ready to collect. Now they're sending it to a third-party company. Now she's getting billed directly, and now it's getting sent to HealthNet, which is understaffed like we are. So they're not looking at the claim for another few months either. And then they're not communicating with the provider because the provider is, if they wait an hour or two to talk to us, they're waiting 6+ hours to talk to HealthNet. So the veteran is getting screwed royally. The VA has already paid HealthNet to provide this care, or to coordinate this care. So HealthNet has already made the bucks. The doctor's ready to sue her, or, you know, collect from her. And, you know, it's just a cycle. It's a cycle. The veteran is not getting their health care. It's a mess. That young lady standing up back there, Maria, she coordinates some of the...
Unfortunately, there's a lot of loopholes and miscommunications regarding it because there's so many different programs in which we can pay services for the veterans. Choice came about because there was a complaint that veterans are not getting their services in a timely manner, or they're not getting them at all. And so to be eligible for choice, there's criteria that you have to meet. And just because you're sent out to choice doesn't mean you're supposed to stay out in the community. You're supposed to get however many visits or appointments and come back to the
Vietnam. I was denied my claim for PTSD for Vietnam because I was accomplished. And a part of my accomplishment, and I just want to put this in because of some of the comments that I heard today. Somebody said Social Security is next. They already got me. I state, because I retired, I have TRICARE, and one of the requirements of TRICARE is that you must have Part B Medicare. Most people who are on Medicare pay $104 a month. Mine is $438. And it is that because I have a military retirement and because I have a civilian retirement. And there, before it happened, they said I was under windfall profit elimination. Every single month, I get a letter from Social Security to say that because of your income 2 years ago, your monthly check will be reduced. So I think, I have not been fighting it just yet, but every time I get one of those. But I think since people are organized, they might want to know that that happens. TRICARE is military Medicare. And I never thought that I would have to pay that much. When I was in, I thought I could go to a military hospital. But when you're in TRICARE, you don't get to go there.
Thank you.
You get to go other places. But the other thing is I do belong to an organization called the Coalition of Veterans Organizations. And what we tried to do about 10 years ago, we put on a referendum on the Illinois ballot, full funding for VA health care, because we heard it then. And so the voters here, I don't think there was a negative vote on it, but there was, and that needs to be brought up again. So I think that is, and that organization is still in existence, and we can still try to help to bring people together. I belong to another group called the National Women Veterans United. We've been to Washington several times. What we find out is that there are a lot of people up there who have a job for veterans, but going from one office to another, we find that none of them communicate.
Thank you. Yes, thank you. We have one last speaker. Allow me to introduce Worker Rights Board member Prexy Nesbitt.
Woo! Thank you very much. I'll be very brief. So brief that you all will hardly see me appear here. But I do think we ought to do a couple of very major things. One is that we need to put our hands together and thank Pastor Jones for giving us this church. We need to thank our president here, President Lindgren. Okay, sister, could you stand in for that other president that we got in this country? You know, a couple of things very quickly. We got work to do. That's what's clearly the message tonight. There's things we got to do to stop the march of the privatization train, these Koch brothers and everything else. It's clear that the only way we're going to do that is to be an organized people. So, two things. One, I ask all of you all to be sure to ask your elected officials to all please urge your member of Congress to vote no on H.R. what number? H.R. 42? All right. Second thing, call both your senators, both of them, and urge them to vote no on S.2193. You can reach them at 202-224-3121.
Say it again.
The number again, the bill is S.2193, the number 202-224-3121. You all should be very happy that time does not permit for me to give a serious speech tonight. Because was I to give a serious speech, you all have given me so much fodder that I wanted to comment on. We would be here for another 9.5 hours. We would break for some food and then come back for the rejoinder. Seriously, let's all, on behalf of the Workers' Rights Board, I want to thank everybody for being here this evening. Last thing is I ask you all to be sure to take your phones tonight, those little things that all of our young people use so easily. You know, if you're all like me, I have to go to my youngest cousins, nephews, and nieces to all get the damn thing to work right. But please, check your phones and go to Facebook and go and like the page that is there representing this whole initiative and our process And that's on the workers' rights page, right? On Facebook? Who's there, Facebook?
Right to Heal VA.
Say it again, brother.
Right to Heal VA.
Right to kill?
Right to heal.
See, that's what I gotta do with my children all the time. You gotta say all the time, what did it? Right to Heal VA. Everybody get it?
Yeah.
All right. Are we all? I'm gonna finish off this note. I spent a lot of time in the liberation movements in South Africa, Mozambique, Namibia, and all that. Yeah, that's why I can't talk a whole long time. But the way we finish meetings up, you always say, we know we got a long-term struggle, and so you say, a luta. That means the struggle. Can I hear it? A luta. Continua. Now you get it all together. A luta. A luta. Thank you all very much.
Thank you. I would just like to quickly, before we adjourn, we do have some representatives from a couple of different offices. We have representatives here from Senator Durbin's office, Senator Duckworth's office, Representative Schneider, Representative Quigley. So thank you very much for attending. Have a good evening.